It's time for another stroll through history. Join me today as I count down the top 10 science fiction and fantasy TV shows of the 1950s. Welcome to Fantasy for the Ages, where we talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. I'm starting a new series looking at the science fiction and fantasy on television that we've come to know and love over the years. Today, I'm talking about the 1950s, which is way back in the early days of television. There really weren't that many things to pick from, and yet there was quite a bit of science fiction and fantasy out there. Now, many of these shows in the early days, interestingly enough, were filmed live, which really has an impact on the quality of the show, but also impacted how they saved tape. There's really not a lot of quality copies of many of these series out there. You can still find some of them on YouTube. They're pretty rough in some cases, but you can get a taste of what these shows brought to the fans on television. So I've done my research for this decade. I can admit I have not watched a lot of these series. There are some of them I've watched quite a bit, and I'll highlight those as I work through the list. But there's plenty of information out on the shows from this decade, and I went through there, dug through the research, and decided here's what would be my top 10, regardless of whether something's number 10 on the list or number 1. Every last one of these shows, if you're a fantasy or sci-fi genre fan, we owe a debt of gratitude to all of these for paving the way for the quality TV that has come down the road. So here's my top 10, as best I can discern. I'll be interested to know how many of these any of you have actually seen. Number 10, Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, broadcasting 1954 and 1955. The show stood out for its more polished production values compared to other 1950s sci-fi TV shows, featuring serialized space adventures with recurring characters and story arcs. It was also notable for depicting relatively realistic space travel concepts and featuring a strong female character, Vina Ray, as part of the team. That just was kind of unheard of in the 50s, even in the 60s. But we'll get to that next decade. Number 9, Buck Rogers, airing 1950 and 1951. I knew about this one, not because I'd seen it, but because of a later remake that I absolutely adored as a kid. This is one of the earliest science fiction programs on television, adapting the popular comic strip hero Buck Rogers, who awakens in the 25th century to defend Earth from futuristic threats. In the TV show, Buck Rogers is a 20th century man who is accidentally put into suspended animation and then awakens in the 25th century. In this futuristic world, he joins forces with others of that time to defend Earth from various space-based threats and villains. And that's a tongue twister, space-based threats. Try saying it 5 times fast. Although the show was short-lived, it set the stage for space adventure shows and featured groundbreaking use of early special effects for its time. Number 8, Flash Gordon, airing 1954 and 1955. There's been a number of iterations of this show, so of course I'd heard of it. I don't believe I actually saw any of the Flash Gordons from this particular series, but I do love the intellectual property. This, as opposed to most of the shows on this list being American productions, this was an international production, a collaboration of producers from 3 different countries, America being one of those. And it was unique for being one of the earliest attempts to adapt a beloved comic strip hero into a live-action television format, using Earth-based locations to portray alien worlds due to budget constraints. They didn't create the things, they found places that, that looks like somewhere spacey. Its emphasis on serialized space adventures and daring escapades, despite its modest production values, distinguished it as a pioneering effort in early TV science fiction. Number 7, Captain Video and his Video Rangers, airing from 1949 all the way to 1955. So this had a bit of a run. It followed the heroic Captain Video, who never gets a first name on the show, and his team as they fought against various threats to Earth in a futuristic setting, often employing advanced technology and space travel. The series was notable for its imaginative storytelling and its special effects for the time, helping to establish many tropes in the science fiction genre on television. Number 6, Space Patrol, 1950 to 1955. This was an American TV show that followed the futuristic adventures of Commander Buzz Corey and his crew as they battled evil forces in space. This one's set way off in the 30th century. Number 5, Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, running the same years as Space Patrol, 1950 to 1955. This was another American TV show about the adventures of Tom Corbett and his fellow cadets at the Space Academy as they trained to become officers in the Solar Guard and explored space. Number 4 brings us something a little different here, and it's ranked higher because it's a little different and really grabbed people a new way, and that was Tales of Tomorrow, airing 1951 to 1953. Now, this was an American anthology series. It featured science fiction and horror stories, a different story every episode, exploring futuristic, paranormal, and dystopian themes. It brought some of the best speculative fiction of the time dramatized to the television. It also attracted some big-name actors, including Roddy McDowall, James Dean, Joan Crawford, Robert Duvall, and Clint Eastwood. Those are just some of the examples that I pulled from. Number 3, The Adventures of Superman, 1952 to 1958. This is one of those shows where I've seen quite a few of the episodes. You could still find them airing on TV in reruns when I was a kid. It's celebrated for its engaging storytelling and the charismatic portrayal of Superman by actor George Reeves, who became an iconic figure as he brought this beloved comic book character to life. The show combined action, adventure, and moral lessons that resonated with audiences while setting the standard for future superhero adaptations on television. Number 2, Science Fiction Theater, airing from 1955 to 1957. This is another American anthology series that presented semi-documentary style stories focused on scientific discoveries, technological advancements, and speculative science fiction scenarios. It would even sometimes feature science experiments that it would show that actually weren't real. They were science fiction, and then would spring into stories that flowed from it. Big names also appeared in this series, including Martin Landau, Roddy McDowall again, Joan Fontaine, Robert Redford, DeForest Kelley, and Clint Eastwood again. DeForest Kelley's role on this show helped him as an actor transition from westerns to science fiction, which led to his role as Dr. McCoy on Star Trek. Finally, number 1 just squeaks onto this list. The Twilight Zone, which debuted in 1959, so the 50s, but ran until 1964. I've watched a ton of these episodes. They were copiously rerun when I was a kid. The Twilight Zone was acclaimed for its thought-provoking storytelling and unique blend of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, often delivering moral lessons through its captivating narratives. Its innovative writing and twist endings, crafted by creator Rod Serling, established it as a groundbreaking anthology series that challenged societal norms and explored the human condition. And because of this show, we get much more like this as we move through the 1960s. Well, there's my top 10 from the 1950s. As I said before, I'm curious now, how many of these had you actually ever even heard of, let alone watched and enjoyed? Let me know in the comments. And did you have any other shows you know were in the 1950s that you thought would be here on the list and you want to give a shout out? Put them down in the comments. I'll love to see it. And what do you think about the shows on this list? Again, any opinions are welcome. Comment box. While you're thinking of commenting, I sure hope you'll hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Zach and I have a whole ton of fun goodness throughout the channel now. Check out our other videos. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.